Money talks, but wealth whispers. Sometimes, however, bigotry screams so loudly it completely deafens common sense. At 35,000 feet, power dynamics can shift in a heartbeat, but nobody expected a transatlantic flight from London Heathrow to New York to become the stage for an $800 million financial bloodbath. When a senior flight attendant decided the young black woman in seat 1A didn't look the part of a first-class passenger, she thought she was just flexing her authority. She had no idea she had just targeted the sole heir to a global private equity empire, triggering a 5-minute countdown that would financially paralyze the airline. Here is the story of the ultimate devastating instant karma. London Heathrow. Terminal 5 was a symphony of rolling luggage, frantic announcements, and the dull roar of thousands of travelers. But inside the exclusive first-class lounge of Horizon Airlines, the atmosphere was hushed, smelling of roasted espresso and expensive leather. Sitting quietly in the corner was 22-year-old Naomi Harrison. Dressed in a vintage oversized Yale hoodie, worn-in Levi's jeans, and a pair of scuffed but highly coveted Air Jordan ones, she looked like any other exhausted college student heading back to the States. She had a pair of noise-canceling headphones slipped over her ears, her fingers flying across the keyboard of her sleek laptop as she reviewed a quarterly earnings report. What the people around her didn't know, and what her unassuming outfit carefully concealed, was that Naomi was the only daughter of Robert Harrison. Robert was the founder and CEO of Harrison Global Logistics and the principal partner of Harrison Capital, a shadowy but immensely powerful private equity firm. The Harrisons didn't just have money, they had institutional power. They were the kind of wealthy that didn't need to flaunt Gucci logos because they owned the supply chains that distributed them. In fact, Harrison Capital was currently in the final highly sensitive stages of underwriting an $800 million debt restructuring bridge loan syndicated through Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs to keep Horizon Airlines out of Chapter 11 bankruptcy. Naomi preferred flying under the radar. She hated the sycophantic behavior that usually followed her when people recognized her last name. She just wanted to get to New York, head to her family's penthouse, and sleep for 12 hours. When the boarding call for Flight 88 to Newark finally echoed through the lounge, Naomi packed her laptop into her worn canvas backpack and made her way to the gate. She bypassed the sprawling economy lines, stepping onto the red carpet designated for the Apex Suite passengers. Waiting at the door of the Boeing 777 was Brenda. Brenda was a senior purser in her late 50s with 30 years of flying under her belt. Her uniform was impeccably pressed, her blonde hair sprayed into a rigid helmet of curls, and her smile was practiced tight and completely devoid of warmth. Over the decades, Brenda had developed a deeply ingrained, highly flawed internal profiling system. She prided herself on knowing who belonged in her cabin and who didn't. To Brenda, wealth had a specific look, older white, dripping in designer labels and carrying an air of demanding entitlement. As Naomi stepped onto the plane, handing her digital boarding pass to the scanner, it beeped with a pleasant green light. "Welcome aboard, Miss Harrison. Seat 1A. The gate agent smiled. Naomi nodded in thanks and turned left into the sprawling, luxurious first-class cabin. She found Seat 1A, a massive private pod near the nose of the aircraft, and tossed her canvas backpack into the overhead bin. She slid into the plush leather seat, let out a deep sigh of relief, and closed her eyes. A few minutes later, Brenda began her rounds offering pre-departure beverages. She carried a silver tray adorned with flutes of Dom Perignon. "Champagne, Mr. Dalton," Brenda cooed to a middle-aged investment banker in Seat 1B. "Thank you, Brenda," the man replied, not looking up from his Wall Street Journal. Brenda moved to Seat 2A, where a wealthy socialite named Eleanor sat clutching a Himalayan crocodile Birkin bag to her chest like a shield. "A mimosa for you, Mrs. Kensington." "Oh, perfectly lovely, thank you." Eleanor smiled. Then Brenda turned toward 1A. Her practiced smile immediately faltered, replaced by a hard, thin line of profound disapproval. Her eyes dragged up and down Naomi's frame, taking in the oversized Yale hoodie, the canvas backpack peeking out from the bin, and the dark brown skin of the young woman settling into the $12,000 seat. Brenda did not offer the silver tray. Instead, she tucked it under her arm and leaned over the privacy partition. "Excuse me," Brenda said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness that barely masked her condescension. "I think you might be lost." Naomi opened her eyes, pulling one side of her headphones off. "I'm sorry. The main cabin is toward the rear of the aircraft," Brenda said, speaking incredibly slowly as if she were addressing a child or someone who couldn't understand English. "This is the Apex suite. First class." Naomi blinked slightly, taken aback, but maintaining her composure. She'd experienced this before, though rarely so blatantly. "I know where I am. I'm in seat 1A. Brenda let out a short, breathy laugh, a sound of pure disbelief. "I highly doubt that, sweetie. Now, if you could just gather your things and head to the back, that would be wonderful. I need to prepare this seat for the actual passenger." Naomi's jaw tightened. She reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, and opened her airline app. She turned the screen brightness up and held it out. "As I said, I am in 1A, Naomi Harrison." Brenda squinted at the glowing screen. She saw the name, saw the seat number, and saw the digital barcode. But her implicit bias was so thick, so deeply rooted, that her brain simply refused to accept the reality in front of her. To Brenda, this young black woman in a hoodie could not possibly have purchased a transatlantic first-class ticket. It had to be a mistake, a glitch, or worse, a scam. Anyone can take a screenshot," Brenda said coldly, her polite facade completely dropping. "I need to see your physical boarding pass." "I don't have a physical pass," Naomi replied, her voice remaining perfectly level. "I used the app. The gate agent scanned it when I walked in. The system turned green." "I'm going to need you to step out of the seat," Brenda commanded, her volume rising just enough to draw the attention of the other passengers. Now, the quiet hum of the first-class cabin was suddenly punctuated by the sharp tension radiating from seat 1A. Mr. Dalton lowered his newspaper, peering over his reading glasses. Eleanor clutched her Birkin tighter, letting out an audible, exaggerated sigh of annoyance at the disruption. Naomi did not move. She sat back in the plush leather, resting her hands neatly in her lap. "I'm not stepping out of this seat. I paid for it. My name is on the manifest. If you have a discrepancy, I suggest you go check your digital terminal in the galley." Brenda's face flushed a deep mottled red. In her 30 years of flying, passengers in the front of the plane usually complied with her every word. To be challenged, and by someone she deemed so utterly beneath her, was an intolerable insult to her authority. Listen to me very carefully," Brenda hissed, leaning in close, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "I don't know how you slipped past the gate agents or whose miles you hacked to get that barcode on your little phone, but you are not flying in my cabin. People pay upwards of $10,000 for these seats." "I am well aware of the pricing," Naomi replied coolly. "My family's travel office booked it yesterday." "Your family's travel office?" Brenda mocked, rolling her eyes. "Right, let's see it then." "See what the credit card," Brenda demanded, holding out her hand. "Show me the physical credit card used to purchase this ticket. If it has your name on it, I'll walk away." Naomi stared at her. This was not a standard security procedure. This was harassment, pure and simple. "The flight was booked through a corporate account, a black card handled by Morgan Stanley. I don't carry the physical plastic. It's an internal transfer." Brenda let out a loud, triumphant "Ha!" that echoed through the cabin. "A corporate black card, of course. How convenient that you don't have it." She turned to the cabin, playing to her audience. "I apologize for the delay, ladies and gentlemen. It seems we have a stowaway trying to pull a fast one." Eleanor leaned forward from seat 2A. "Excuse me, stewardess. Could we please hurry this along? I have a connecting helicopter waiting at the Manhattan heliport, and I simply cannot be delayed because someone is trying to steal an upgrade." "I assure you, Mrs. Kensington, I am handling it," Brenda promised, shooting Naomi a venomous glare. Naomi felt a hot spark of anger ignite in her chest, but she forcefully pushed it down. Her father had always taught her that in the face of absolute ignorance, losing your temper only gives the oppressor the ammunition they desperately want. Cold, calculating logic was the ultimate weapon. "Brenda, isn't it?" Naomi asked, glancing at the woman's gold name tag. "It's Senior Purser Miller to you." "Bah." "Well, Senior Purser Miller," Naomi said, her voice dropping to a dangerously calm register. "I suggest you walk to the front, call the captain, and ask him to verify the manifest with ground control. If you escalate this any further without doing your due diligence, you are going to make a catastrophic mistake." Brenda sneered. The only mistake here is you thinking you could play me. I've dealt with grifters like you before. You look for an empty seat, wait until the last minute, and act like you belong. Well, you don't belong here. The racial undertones of the word belong hung heavily in the air. Naomi felt it. The other passengers felt it. But rather than intervene, the cabin remained entirely silent, complicit in their comfort. Last chance, Brenda said, crossing her arms. Walk to the back or I call security and have you physically removed from this aircraft. Naomi slowly reached up, pulled her headphones down around her neck, and looked Brenda dead in the eyes. Call them. Brenda marched up to the forward galley, snatching the intercom phone off its cradle. Through the thin curtain, Naomi could hear the frantic whispered accusations. Belligerent passenger, refusing to leave the premium cabin, aggressive, unauthorized boarding, need ground control immediately. 5 minutes passed. The heavy silence in the cabin was suffocating. Naomi pulled her laptop back out quietly, saving her spreadsheets and closing the lid. She knew exactly what was about to happen. She also knew exactly what she was going to do the moment she stepped off the plane. 2 large men in high-vis security jackets, accompanied by a Heathrow police officer, stepped onto the aircraft. Brenda met them at the door, pointing an accusatory finger straight at seat 1A. That's her, Brenda said loudly. She refuses to produce valid payment verification and is refusing crew instructions. The police officer, a stern-looking man named Davies, approached Naomi. Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to gather your belongings and step off the aircraft. Officer, Naomi said calmly, remaining seated. My name is Naomi Harrison. I am a ticketed passenger in 1A. The purser is refusing to acknowledge my digital boarding pass because she does not believe I can afford the seat. She is demanding a corporate credit card that I am not legally required to carry. Officer Davies looked conflicted. He glanced at the digital scanner tablet attached to his belt, typing in her name. Her name is on the manifest Brenda. Seat 1A is assigned to a Harrison N. It's a stolen identity or a hacked account. Brenda insisted, her voice shrill with panic and stubbornness. She doesn't even have the card. Look at her, officer. Does she look like she belongs in a $12,000 pod? She's being aggressive and making the other passengers feel unsafe. Eleanor chimed in from the back. She has been quite disruptive, officer, please. We just want to take off. Davies sighed, looking back at Naomi. Miss, the captain has the final say on who flies. The purser has stated you are a disruption to the cabin. Under international aviation law, if the crew requests your removal, I have to escort you off. We can sort this out at the terminal, but you cannot stay on this plane. Naomi looked at the officer, then at Eleanor, and finally at Brenda. Brenda was practically glowing with smug satisfaction, her chin tilted up in a portrait of arrogant victory. Naomi didn't argue. She didn't yell. She didn't give them the angry black woman stereotype they were so desperately trying to provoke. Instead, she stood up smoothly, her movements deliberate and precise. She grabbed her canvas backpack from the overhead bin and slung it over one shoulder. She walked slowly toward the front door of the aircraft. As she passed Brenda, Naomi stopped. The 2 women were inches apart. You think you've won, Naomi said, her voice so quiet, only Brenda could hear it. But you're not just kicking me off a plane, Brenda. You're grounding your entire fleet. Brenda scoffed, rolling her eyes. Enjoy your flight on a budget airline, sweetie. Goodbye. Naomi stepped off the plane and onto the jet bridge. The heavy metal door of the Boeing 777 slammed shut behind her, the lock engaging with a loud, definitive clack. Naomi walked up the sloping tunnel, the cool air of the terminal hitting her face. The moment she cleared the gate, leaving the bewildered gate agents behind, she stopped, leaning against the glass windows overlooking the tarmac. She watched as the tug vehicle hooked up to the front landing gear of Flight 88, preparing for pushback. She pulled her phone from her pocket. She bypassed her contacts and dialed a private encrypted number that only 3 people in the world possessed. It rang twice. Dad, Naomi said, her voice completely devoid of emotion. Naomi, sweetheart. Robert Harrison's deep, booming voice came through the speaker. You should be in the air. Did you take off yet? No, I was just forcefully removed from the plane by the senior purser and the police. A terrifying, heavy silence fell over the line. Are you hurt? Are you safe? I'm fine, Dad, but the purser decided I didn't look like I belonged in first class. She accused me of theft, called me a grifter, and had me kicked off. Another pause. When Robert spoke again, the warmth of a father was gone, replaced by the icy, ruthless precision of a billionaire CEO whose only child had just been publicly humiliated. "Which airline?" Robert asked softly. "Horizon, Flight 88. "The same Horizon that is currently begging us to clear an $800 million bridge loan through Goldman Sachs by 5 p.m. today so they don't default on their creditors. The very same. Naomi, go to the private terminal. I'll have the Gulfstream in the air in 20 minutes to come get you." Robert paused, and the sound of a heavy oak desk drawer opening echoed through the phone. "Give me 5 minutes. That plane is not leaving London. In fact, by the time I'm done, none of their planes are leaving the ground." Naomi hung up. She stood by the window watching the heavy machinery pulling Flight 88 away from the gate and began a silent 5-minute countdown in her head. 4,000 miles away, high above the chaotic streets of Manhattan, the 65th floor of the Harrison Capitol building was completely silent. It was a silence born not of peace, but of absolute terrifying power. Robert Harrison sat behind a massive desk carved from a single slab of reclaimed mahogany. At 58, he possessed the rugged, sharp-eyed intensity of a man who had built an empire from the ground up and had crushed countless competitors to keep it. He did not yell when he was angry. He did not throw things. When Robert Harrison was truly furious, he became perfectly, dangerously still. He pressed a single silver button on his intercom. "William, get in here, now." Within 15 seconds, William Barrett, the chief financial officer of Harrison Capital, hurried into the office. William was a brilliant numbers man who knew that when Robert used that tone, billions of dollars were about to change hands. "Sir," William asked, closing the heavy glass door behind him. "The Horizon Airlines bridge loan." Robert said, his voice a low, gravelly hum. "The $800 million syndicate with Goldman. Have we signed the final release of funds?" "No, sir," William replied, checking his tablet. "The wire is queued in escrow. We were scheduled to execute the release at 4:45 p.m. Eastern, right before the market closes, to give them the liquidity they need for tomorrow's creditor meetings." "Kill it," Robert said. William froze, his thumb hovering over his screen. "Excuse me, Robert, if we pull the funding now, Horizon defaults on their fuel vendor contracts by midnight. Their credit rating will immediately drop to junk status. The airline will essentially cease to exist by tomorrow morning." "I am aware of how bankruptcy works, William," Robert replied coldly. "I said kill the wire, drain the escrow, pull out of the syndicate completely, invoke the discretionary withdrawal clause, call Gregory Hayes at Goldman Sachs, and tell him Harrison Capital is officially out." William swallowed hard. "May I ask why the underwriters verified—" "Because," Robert interrupted, his eyes locking onto William's. "10 minutes ago, one of their senior pursers publicly humiliated my daughter, accused her of being a thief because of the color of her skin, and had police drag her off a flight in London. Horizon Airlines just told Naomi she doesn't belong in their first-class cabin. So I'm going to make sure they no longer have a first-class cabin, or planes, or a company." The blood drained from William's face. He didn't ask another question. He simply nodded, tapped 3 times on his encrypted tablet, and walked out of the room to execute the financial execution. 3 minutes later, in a towering glass skyscraper in downtown Chicago, the executive suite of Horizon Airlines was in a state of relaxed anticipation. Arthur Pendleton, the CEO of Horizon, was pouring himself a glass of aged scotch to celebrate surviving the hardest quarter in the company's history. The $800 million injection was their lifeline. It was a done deal. Then his private cell phone rang. It was Gregory Hayes, the lead syndication banker at Goldman Sachs. "Gregory, tell me the wire has cleared." Arthur answered jovially. "Arthur, listen to me very carefully." Gregory's voice was tight, strained, and panicked. "The deal is dead. Harrison Capital just pulled the plug. They invoked the discretionary withdrawal clause. They yanked their entire position out of escrow." Arthur dropped his scotch glass. It shattered on the hardwood floor, amber liquid pooling around his Italian leather shoes. "What? That's impossible. We signed the term sheets. If they pull out, the other investors will panic and jump ship." They already are. Gregory said grimly. Without Harrison anchoring the debt, the risk models just triggered an automatic sell-off. The entire syndicate is collapsing as we speak. Arthur, the fuel vendors just got an automated alert that your credit has been downgraded to default status. They are locking the pumps. Why? Arthur screamed, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. Why would Robert Harrison do this 5 minutes before the wire transferred? He left a message for you, Gregory said, his voice dropping to a whisper. He said to tell you check the passenger manifest for Flight 88 out of Heathrow, Seat 1A. Ask your crew what they did, then call your bankruptcy lawyers. Arthur's heart plummeted into his stomach. He slammed the phone down and sprinted toward his assistant's desk. Get me the VP of European Operations on the line right now and patch me through to the cockpit of Flight 88 out of London. Do not let that plane take off. Back at London, Heathrow Flight 88 was slowly lumbering down taxiway Alpha, making its way toward the active runway. Inside the Apex suite cabin, the atmosphere had shifted from tense to triumphant, at least for Brenda. She was practically gliding down the aisle, her chest puffed out with self-righteous pride. She poured more Dom Perignon for Mr. Dalton, offering him an extra-wide, blinding smile. I do apologize again for the unpleasantness, Mr. Dalton, Brenda crooned. We simply cannot let standards slip. Security is our top priority. Quite right, Dalton muttered, though he looked slightly uncomfortable, shifting his eyes away from her. Eleanor, however, was thrilled. You handled it beautifully, Brenda. It's ridiculous what people will try to get away with these days. I mean, wearing a hooded sweatshirt in first class. It's practically an insult to the rest of us. Exactly. Brenda agreed, picking up Naomi's discarded champagne flute from the empty seat when and tossing it into the galley trash with a satisfying clatter. She had won. She had protected her domain. In the cockpit, Captain Thomas Mitchell and his first officer were running through their pre-takeoff checklists. Flaps set to 10 degrees. Auto throttle armed, the first officer read off the clipboard. Roger that. Tower Horizon 88 heavy holding short of runway 27 right, ready for departure. Captain Mitchell spoke into his headset. Horizon 88, you are cleared for takeoff, runway 27 right, the air traffic controller replied. Captain Mitchell placed his hand on the heavy throttle levers, preparing to push the massive Rolls-Royce engines to take off thrust. But before he could move, a blaring red alarm pierced the quiet of the flight deck. Beep, 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 the ACARS aircraft communications. Addressing and reporting system screen in the center console flashed with an urgent overriding company text message. It was coded Critical Tier 1. Captain Mitchell frowned, pulling his hand off the throttle. He leaned in to read the glowing green text. Urgent. All Horizon aircraft hold position. Flight 88 canceled. Return to gate immediately. Do not depart. Corporate asset freeze in effect. Engines off upon arrival. What the hell is this? The first officer asked, his eyes wide. A corporate asset freeze? Did we go bankrupt? Tower Horizon 88. Captain Mitchell said, his voice tight. We have a company emergency. We are aborting takeoff and requesting immediate taxi routing back to Terminal 5. Horizon 88, copy your abort. Turn right onto taxiway Bravo, hold for a tug. Be advised your company's ground operations team is currently swarming your gate. In the first-class cabin, the gentle rumble of the engines suddenly died down to a faint whine. The massive aircraft came to a shuddering halt in the middle of the tarmac. Brenda nearly tripped over a passenger's bag as the plane jerked. She recovered her balance, smoothing her skirt with an annoyed huff. Just a slight delay, folks, probably ATC spacing. Then the intercom chimed. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Mitchell from the flight deck. The voice echoed, sounding incredibly stressed. I apologize for the inconvenience, but we have received an emergency directive from our corporate headquarters. All Horizon Airlines flights have been grounded worldwide, effective immediately. We are currently waiting for a tug to pull us back to the gate. Please remain seated. The cabin erupted. Grounded. Eleanor shrieked, her aristocratic composure entirely vanishing. What does he mean, grounded? I have a helicopter waiting. This is unacceptable, Mr. Dalton shouted, throwing his newspaper to the floor. I have a board meeting in Manhattan in 6 hours. Brenda's heart began to race. A worldwide grounding. She'd been flying for 30 years and had never heard of a company enacting an immediate mid-taxi corporate freeze unless there was a massive terrorist threat or The airline had run out of money. "Please everyone stay calm," Brenda said, holding up her hands, her fake smile trembling. "I'm sure it's just a computer glitch. I'll go speak to the captain." She rushed to the front, punching the code to unlock the reinforced cockpit door. She pushed her way in just as Captain Mitchell was hanging up the company satellite phone. He looked pale, as if he had seen a ghost. "Thomas, what is going on?" Brenda demanded. "The passengers are furious." Captain Mitchell turned slowly in his seat, looking at Brenda with a mixture of horror and absolute disgust. "Brenda Itzer," he said, his voice shaking. "Did you forcefully remove a passenger from seat 1A before we pushed back?" Brenda blinked, taken aback by the question. "Yes, of course. She was a fraud. A young black girl in sweatpants trying to pass off a fake digital ticket. She refused to show a corporate card, so I had police remove her. I was protecting the integrity of the cabin." The first officer buried his face in his hands, letting out a long, groaning sigh. "Protecting the integrity of the cabin." Captain Mitchell repeated the words, tasting like ash in his mouth. "Brenda, that fraud was Naomi Harrison." "I don't care if her name is Mary Poppins." Brenda snapped, crossing her arms. "She didn't belong. Naomi Harrison." Captain Mitchell yelled, his professional demeanor breaking completely. "Is the only daughter of Robert Harrison, the billionaire who owns Harrison Capital, the firm that was literally 5 minutes away from wiring us $800 million so we could buy jet fuel tomorrow." Brenda froze. The color instantly drained from her perfectly made-up face. No, that's impossible. She didn't look rich enough for you," Mitchell roared, slamming his fist on the console. "Well, guess what? Her father just pulled the funding. The syndicate collapsed. Horizon Airlines is officially insolvent. The fuel trucks at the gate won't even pump gas into this plane because our company credit cards are bouncing. You didn't just kick off a passenger, Brenda. You just bankrupted the entire airline." The slow, agonizing tow back to Terminal 5 felt like a funeral procession. The cabin was dead silent, save for the furious whispered complaints of the wealthy passengers whose schedules had just been obliterated. Brenda stood in the forward galley, hiding behind the curtain. She felt sick. Her hands were shaking uncontrollably, and a cold sweat had broken out across her forehead. It couldn't be true, she kept telling herself. It was a coincidence. A girl in a hoodie doesn't take down an airline. When the plane finally connected to the jet bridge, the heavy front door was violently thrown open from the outside. Standing there was Simon Fletcher, the Vice President of European Operations for Horizon Airlines. His tie was askew, his face was flushed, and he looked like a man who had just watched his house burn down. Flanking him were 3 Heathrow police officers, the very same officers who had escorted Naomi off the plane 20 minutes prior. Simon stormed onto the aircraft, ignoring the bewildered stares of the first-class passengers. He locked eyes with Brenda, who was trembling by the espresso machine. "Where is she?" Simon barked, his voice carrying clearly into the cabin. "Who?" Brenda squeaked, her throat tightening. "Naomi Harrison," Simon yelled. "Where did she go after you threw her off my airplane?" I don't know," Brenda stammered, shrinking back against the metal galley wall. "She walked up the jet bridge. Sir, I was just following protocol. She didn't have the physical card." "Protocol?" Simon interrupted, his voice reaching a hysterical pitch. "Do you know what you've done? I just got off the phone with the CEO in Chicago. We are in free fall. Our stock price plummeted 40% in the last 10 minutes. We have 70 planes in the air right now that won't have fuel to make their return trips." "You profiled the daughter of our sole financial savior because she was wearing a hoodie." The passengers in the first-class cabin gasped collectively. Eleanor covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with shock. Mr. Dalton slowly closed his eyes, shaking his head in disbelief. They had all sat there and watched it happen. They had encouraged it, and now they were collateral damage. "I didn't know," Brenda cried, tears of panic finally spilling over her mascara. "She didn't tell me who she was." "She gave you her name," Simon shouted. "She gave you her boarding pass." "She was cleared by security. You decided purely based on your own twisted prejudice to humiliate her. Well, congratulations, Brenda. You wanted to flex your authority. You wanted to decide who flies and who doesn't." Simon stepped forward, reaching out and grabbing the gold senior purser wings pinned to Brenda's lapel. With a sharp yank, he ripped them right off her uniform, leaving 2 small holes in the pristine fabric. "You are terminated." Simon said, his voice turning ice cold. Effective immediately, for cause, meaning you forfeit your pension, your severance, and your flight benefits. You are no longer an employee of Horizon Airlines, assuming Horizon Airlines even exists by tomorrow morning. Brenda let out a choked sob, clutching her chest where her wings used to be. You can't do this. I have 30 years of seniority. You don't have a job, Simon spat. He turned to the police officers. Escort this woman off my aircraft. Remove her security badge and walk her out to the public curb. She is not allowed in the employee lounges. Officer Davies, the man who had reluctantly escorted Naomi away, stepped forward. He looked at Brenda with zero sympathy. Let's go, ma'am. Collect your personal items. As Brenda, weeping and stripped of her pride, was marched down the aisle to grab her roller bag, the passengers who had supported her just minutes ago now turned away, refusing to meet her eyes. Eleanor busied herself by digging through her Birkin bag. Mr. Dalton stared intensely out the window. Simon Fletcher took a deep breath, trying to compose himself, and picked up the PA microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, Simon said, his voice echoing through the massive grounded Boeing 777. I deeply apologize. Flight 88 is officially canceled. In fact, all Horizon operations are currently suspended. Please gather your belongings and proceed to the terminal. We have no customer service agents available to rebook you as our systems have been locked by our creditors. As the Millionaire passengers erupted into furious shouting, demanding refunds and compensation, Simon dropped the microphone. He knew it was over. He turned and walked back up the jet bridge, desperately dialing the private terminal in a hopeless attempt to find Naomi Harrison before she left London. But it was already too late. In the sprawling high-tech boardroom of Horizon Airlines' Chicago headquarters, the air was practically vibrating with panic. The panoramic windows, offering a sweeping view of Lake Michigan, did nothing to soothe the executives gathered around the monolithic conference table. The time was 11:15 a.m. Central, and the company was bleeding an estimated $3 million a minute. Arthur Pendleton, the CEO, looked as though he had aged a decade in the last hour. His tie was discarded on a nearby chair, his sleeves rolled up, and his hands were planted firmly on the polished wood as he stared at the glowing financial monitors on the wall. The ticker symbol for Horizon HZN was in a terrifying, unchecked freefall. How bad is the grounding? Arthur demanded, his voice cracking. The chief operating officer, a stern woman named Valerie, swiped a hand over her exhausted face. Catastrophic. We have 142 flights currently stranded on the tarmac globally because fuel vendors have electronically locked the pumps. The automated default alerts went out to everyone. Catering, ground handling, baggage contractors, they all operate on net 30 terms backed by our credit rating. The second Harrison Capital pulled the $800 million syndicate. Moody's and Standard & Poor's downgraded us to junk. Nobody will touch us without cash up front, and we don't have it. What about the passengers rioting? Valerie said bluntly. Heathrow Terminal 5 is a war zone. JFK, LAX, and O'Hare are following suit. The FAA has already called twice, threatening to pull our operating certificates if we don't clear the congestion at the gates. We are legally required to offer hotel vouchers for stranded passengers, but the corporate cards used to book those blocks are declining. Arthur felt a cold, nauseating knot tighten in his stomach. He looked down at the speakerphone sitting in the center of the table. Get me Robert Harrison. I don't care if you have to hack his private line. Get him on the phone right now. His executive assistant furiously typed on her laptop. Sir, I've been trying. His gatekeepers at Harrison Capital are stonewalling. They say he is currently tracking a private Gulfstream flight and is unavailable. He's tracking his daughter, Arthur, whispered the horrifying reality of the situation fully settling in. A single prejudiced flight attendant had just vaporized a legacy airline because she wanted to play gatekeeper. Suddenly, the speakerphone clicked. A sharp digital beep echoed through the room. Arthur, a voice boomed. It was calm, resonant, and completely devoid of mercy. Arthur nearly lunged over the table. Robert, thank God. Robert, listen to me. You have to reverse the withdrawal. You are triggering a systemic collapse. We can handle the Heathrow situation internally. I will personally fire the entire crew. I'll issue a public apology to Naomi. I'll give her lifetime global diamond status. Arthur, stop talking, Robert Harrison interrupted. The absolute authority in his tone silenced the entire boardroom. Lifetime status. On an airline that won't exist by Friday, keep your perks. Robert, please. This is an $800 million deal. You're punishing 50,000 employees because of one ignorant purser. No, Arthur Robert countered, his voice chillingly precise. I am punishing a corporate culture that allowed that ignorant purser to thrive. Do you think this is the first time Brenda Miller has profiled a passenger? Do you think this is the first time she's treated someone of color like a second-class citizen? Of course not, but she had 30 years of seniority. Your HR department protected her. Your union shielded her. Your management turned a blind eye to the rot on your front lines because she kept the wealthy white passengers in the Apex suite happy. You built a system that empowered her bigotry. I am simply tearing that system down. Arthur swallowed hard, sweat dripping down his temples. What do you want, Robert? Name your price. We have term sheets. We can renegotiate the interest rates on the bridge loan. I'll give you whatever margin you want. The bridge loan is dead, Robert stated. I don't want to be your creditor anymore, Arthur. As of 10 minutes ago, Harrison Capital, along with a coalition of aggressive activist investors, began buying up your plummeting stock. You were trading at $42 a share this morning. You're currently at $8.50. By the time the market closes, you'll be a penny stock. Valerie gasped, covering her mouth. Hostile takeover, he's going to buy us for parts. Robert heard her over the line. Not for parts, Valerie. For control. I am going to acquire a controlling 51% stake in Horizon Airlines for a fraction of what it was worth yesterday. When the market opens tomorrow, I will inject $1 billion of private equity to stabilize the operations. But my first act as the majority shareholder will be to dissolve the current board of directors. Arthur felt his legs give out. He slumped into his chair. You're firing me. I'm firing all of you, Robert corrected. Pack your offices. The deal will be finalized via the SEC by midnight. And Arthur, tell your VP in London he did a good job stripping that purser of her wings. I'll make sure he keeps his pension. The line went dead. The click echoed in the silent boardroom like a gunshot. Back in London, the chaos inside Terminal 5 was reaching a fever pitch. Thousands of stranded Horizon passengers were swarming the customer service desks, shouting at overwhelmed, tearful agents who had no answers and no working computers. Navigating through this sea of fury was Brenda. She had been stripped of her security clearance, meaning she couldn't take the private employee corridors. She had to walk through the public terminal dragging her heavy roller bag, wearing her Horizon uniform, minus the prestigious gold wings on her lapel. She kept her head down, her face red and blotchy from crying, hoping to slip out to the taxi rank unnoticed. It was a vain hope. There she is, a sharp, aristocratic voice rang out over the din of the crowd. Brenda froze. She looked up to see Eleanor, the wealthy socialite from seat 2A, pushing her way through the throng, clutching her Birkin bag. Right behind her was Mr. Dalton, the investment banker. You, Eleanor shrieked, pointing a manicured finger directly at Brenda's chest. You absolute incompetent fool. Because of your little power trip, I have missed a non-refundable charter to the Hamptons. My luggage is locked under a grounded plane, and there isn't a single flight out of Heathrow until tomorrow. Brenda shrank back, her practiced customer service smile entirely gone, replaced by pure terror. Mrs. Kensington, please, I was just trying to protect the cabin. Protect the cabin? From what Mr. Dalton roared, his face purple with rage. The daughter of a billionaire, I had a merger meeting with Pfizer in New York tonight. Do you know how much money your protection just cost me? Millions? You ignorant, prejudiced idiot. The surrounding crowd of stranded passengers caught wind of the confrontation. Word had already begun to spread via Twitter and Reddit about the exact cause of the global grounding. The hashtag Horizon Grounded was trending #1 worldwide, accompanied by leaked audio from the terminal of Simon Fletcher firing Brenda. That's the flight attendant, someone in the crowd yelled. She's the racist who got the airline shut down. People began pulling out their phones, pressing record and shoving the cameras in Brenda's face. How does it feel to ruin tens of thousands of vacations? A young man shouted. Are you proud of yourself? A woman screamed. Brenda panicked. She abandoned her roller bag, pushed past Eleanor, and sprinted toward the exit doors, tears streaming down her face as the flash of smartphone cameras documented her humiliation. She burst through the sliding glass doors into the damp London air, practically diving into the back of a black cab. Just drive, she sobbed to the driver. Anywhere, just get me out of here. As the cab pulled away from Heathrow, Brenda pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking so violently she could barely unlock the screen. She had 12 missed calls from her husband and countless texts from her colleagues, ranging from asking what happened to outright cursing her name. She dialed the emergency number for the flight attendants' union representative. She paid her dues. They had to protect her. They had to fight this wrongful termination. "Hello, Brenda!" The union rep, a man named Marcus, answered. He sounded exhausted. "Marcus, thank God," Brenda wept. "Simon Fletcher just fired me on the spot. No review, no hearing. You have to file a grievance immediately. They can't just strip my pension." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. "Brenda, I've seen the reports from the captain and the first officer. I've also spoken with Horizon's legal counsel. So it's hearsay. I thought it was a fake ticket. You demanded a physical corporate credit card from a passenger who had a verified scanned digital boarding pass." Marcus said, his voice completely flat. "That is a direct violation of federal aviation boarding protocols. You then bypassed the captain's authority by calling the police to remove a passenger who posed zero security threat based entirely on your personal assessment of her appearance. You violated Title VII anti-discrimination policies. I have 30 years. "Your 30 years don't mean anything right now," Brenda Marcus interrupted, "because you acted completely outside of standard operating procedure, and because your actions directly resulted in material financial devastation to the company. The union cannot protect you. The liability clause in our contract voids our representation in cases of gross negligence and discrimination." Brenda's breath hitched. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're on your own, Brenda. And frankly, considering the Department of Transportation is launching an investigation into your conduct, I suggest you retain a very good, very expensive private attorney. Do not call this number again." The line disconnected. Brenda sat in the back of the cab, staring out at the gray London sky, the full weight of her actions finally crushing her. She had let her prejudice dictate her actions for 5 minutes. In return, she had lost her career, her pension, her reputation, and her future. Meanwhile, 40,000 feet above the Atlantic Ocean, a sleek, heavily customized Gulfstream G650ER soared smoothly toward New York. Inside the cabin was a masterclass in understated luxury. Naomi Harrison sat in a plush armchair sipping a cup of herbal tea. She had finally taken off her Yale hoodie, opting for a comfortable cashmere sweater. Her satellite phone chimed. It was her father. "We're closing the deal in an hour," sweetheart Robert said. His voice was softer now, the ruthless billionaire replaced by the protective father. "Horizon is ours. The current board is out. The CEO is resigning tomorrow morning." Naomi looked out the window at the endless expanse of clouds. She didn't feel a sense of triumphant glee. She just felt a quiet, profound exhaustion. "I didn't want to destroy a company, Dad," Naomi said softly. "There are good people who work there. Pilots, mechanics gate agents. I don't want them losing their livelihoods because of what one woman did to me." "They won't," Robert assured her. "I'm injecting capital tomorrow to get the planes back in the air. The frontline workers keep their jobs, their pay, and their benefits. But the culture is going to change. Drastically. And I want you to lead it." Naomi blinked surprised. "Lead it, Dad. I'm 22. I'm finishing my MBA. "You're a Harrison," Robert replied firmly. "And you understand exactly what the modern traveler faces. Tomorrow morning, when the press release goes out announcing the acquisition, it's going to announce the new restructuring committee. You are going to be on the board of directors, Naomi. You are going to rewrite their passenger bill of rights, their anti-discrimination training, and their hiring protocols. You're going to make sure that what happened to you today never happens to anyone else on a Horizon aircraft ever again." Naomi smiled slowly, a sense of purpose replacing her fatigue. "I can do that. I know you can. Get some sleep, Naomi. Tomorrow you have an airline to run." 8 months had passed since the catastrophic grounding of Flight 88. In the corporate world, 8 months is usually a blip, a fraction of a fiscal year. But for the aviation industry, it was the exact amount of time required to witness a total, merciless metamorphosis. The Horizon crash, as it was now famously taught in graduate business seminars from Wharton to the London School of Economics, had become the ultimate cautionary tale. It was a terrifying, Billion-dollar reminder to every executive on Wall Street: the frontline employee is the absolute face of your company. And the tolerance of implicit bias is not just a moral failure, it is a massive terminal financial liability. The Chicago headquarters of Horizon Airlines was unrecognizable. The dark mahogany walls and suffocating old money aesthetic of Arthur Pendleton's regime had been completely gutted. In its place was a sprawling glass-walled expanse of modern transparency, buzzing with the frantic, energized hum of a tech startup rather than a legacy carrier. Inside the primary glass boardroom overlooking the icy expanse of Lake Michigan, 23-year-old Naomi Harrison sat at the head of the long table. She had not merely joined the board of directors. Her father's private equity firm had mandated her installation as the chairwoman of the Restructuring and Ethics Committee. She wore a sharply tailored midnight blue Alexander McQueen blazer, but underneath it she maintained her signature defiance, a simple, crisp white t-shirt and a pair of immaculate unreleased Air Jordan 1s. Spread out before her were the Q3 financial reports. "We are up 32% in premium cabin bookings year over year," announced William Barrett, who had been brought over from Harrison Capital to serve as Horizon's new chief financial officer. "Our total revenue per available seat mile has outpaced Delta and United for 2 consecutive quarters. The market hasn't just forgiven us, they are actively championing us." Naomi nodded, tapping a sleek silver pen against her notepad. "And the rollout of the Harrison Protocol." The Harrison Protocol was Naomi's crown jewel. It was a proprietary, decentralized digital ticketing and boarding system she had engineered alongside a team of Silicon Valley developers. The system completely eradicated the need for human verification of payment at the gate or on the aircraft. Once a ticket was purchased, whether by a corporate black card, a digital wallet, or a standard credit card, the passenger's biometrics and digital token were locked into an encrypted blockchain. It physically removed the discretionary power of flight attendants to challenge a passenger's right to their seat based on their appearance. If the scanner flashed green, the passenger belonged. End of discussion. Free, fully implemented across all domestic and international hubs, Valerie, the surviving chief operating officer, replied. Valerie had adapted quickly to the new regime, recognizing Naomi's sheer brilliance. "We have completely bypassed the gate agent and purser discretion loops. Furthermore, our mandatory rigorous de-escalation and anti-bias training has been completed by 98% of our flight crews. Those who refused to participate or failed the psychological evaluations were offered early severance packages." "Good," Naomi said, her voice carrying the same quiet, lethal authority her father possessed. "Because we are not just selling flights anymore. We are selling a guarantee of basic human dignity. The moment we compromise on that, we might as well ground the fleet ourselves." The karma of that fateful day didn't just end with sweeping corporate policy changes. It trickled down, precise and unrelenting, to every single individual who had been complicit in the cabin of Flight 88. Eleanor, the wealthy socialite who had cheered on the harassment from Seat 2. A discovered this the hard way. 3 months after the takeover, she had attempted to book a first-class ticket to Milan for Fashion Week on Horizon's newly minted Apex Reserve service. When she logged into her account, she found her lifetime million-miler status revoked and her profile locked. Furious, Eleanor had marched into the private ticketing office in Manhattan, demanding an explanation. The customer service manager had calmly handed her a printed document. Under Naomi's new administration, Horizon had updated its terms of service to include a strict complicity and harassment clause. Because Eleanor had actively verbally encouraged a discriminatory act and disrupted the flight crew's ability to maintain a safe environment for all passengers, she was placed on a permanent, irrevocable corporate no-fly list. All of her accrued miles were donated to a legal defense fund for marginalized travelers. Her money, her influence, and her Himalayan crocodile Birkin bag could not buy her way back onto a Horizon aircraft for the rest of her life. Mr. Dalton, the investment banker from Seat 1B, had met a similar quietly devastating fate, finding his corporate travel accounts flagged and denied across the entire Star Alliance network due to shared behavioral data partnerships. But nowhere was the karma more brutal, more isolating, and more absolute than in the life of Brenda Miller. It was a miserable, rain-slick Tuesday afternoon in Croydon, a dreary industrial suburb deep in South London. The sky was the color of bruised iron, and the relentless drizzle cast a depressing gray pallor over the local discount retail park. Brenda stood behind the scuffed Formica counter of Bargain Baggage, a cut-rate luggage outlet that smelled faintly of cheap off-gassing plastic and damp carpet. She was 59 years old, but the last 8 months had aged her a decade. The perfectly sprayed blonde helmet of curls was gone, replaced by thin, tired hair tied back in a messy clip. The impeccably tailored prestigious Horizon Airlines uniform had been replaced by a scratchy, ill-fitting maroon polyester polo shirt featuring a cartoonish suitcase logo on the breast pocket. Her life was in ruins. When Simon Fletcher had terminated her for cause on that jet bridge, it had triggered a catastrophic domino effect. The union had legally abandoned her, citing her blatant violation of Title VII and federal boarding protocols. Desperate Brenda had hired a private attorney, draining her savings and remortgaging her modest home in a futile attempt to sue Horizon for wrongful termination. The judge had thrown the case out with prejudice, leaving her completely bankrupt. Her reputation was worse than her finances. The leaked audio of her firing had circulated on the internet for weeks. She couldn't walk into a grocery store without fearing someone would recognize her as the racist purser who blew up an airline. Her husband, unable to handle the financial stress and the public humiliation, had quietly filed for divorce, taking half of what little they had left. Now her domain was not the luxurious champagne-soaked Apex suite of a Boeing 777. Her domain was a 300-square-foot shop selling knockoff suitcases to budget travelers. The bell above the glass door chimed, cutting through the monotonous hum of the shop's flickering fluorescent lights. A young couple walked in, shaking the rain off their coats. They were in their early 20s, casually dressed. The young woman, wearing a faded university hoodie and a pair of worn-in sneakers, browsed the clearance aisle before pulling a brightly colored, hard-shell carry-on bag toward the register. Brenda looked at the girl, her stomach twisting into a cold, familiar knot. The demographic resemblance was uncanny. It was like looking at a ghost from Terminal 5. "Just this one, please." The young woman smiled politely, placing the cheap suitcase on the counter. Brenda mechanically scanned the barcode. "That will be £35, miss." The young woman patted her pockets, a brief look of realization crossing her face. She pulled out her smartphone. "Oh, I'm so sorry. I left my physical wallet in the car. I only have my Apple Pay. I don't have the physical card on me. Is a digital payment all right?" "I don't have the physical card." The words echoed in Brenda's mind, amplifying until they were a deafening roar. Her vision blurred at the edges. Suddenly she wasn't in a dreary shop in Croydon. She was standing in the aisle of Flight 88. She could smell the roasted espresso of the first-class galley. She could feel the heavy, arrogant certainty in her chest as she looked down at the young black woman in the Yale hoodie. "I need to see the physical credit card. Anyone can take a screenshot." "You don't belong here." A bead of cold sweat rolled down Brenda's spine. Her hands began to tremble so violently that she had to grip the edges of the Formica counter to steady herself. The phantom weight of her gold senior purser wings felt like a physical ache on her chest. "Ma'am, are you all right?" the young woman asked, her polite smile shifting into mild concern. "If you don't take digital, I can run out to the car." Brenda swallowed the heavy metallic taste of panic and regret in her throat. She looked at the glowing digital screen of the girl's phone. She remembered the green light of Naomi Harrison's boarding pass. She remembered the smug, intoxicating superiority she'd felt right before she threw her entire existence away over a prejudiced assumption. Brenda forced her eyes down to the register, her voice a hollow, defeated whisper. "Yes, miss," Brenda said, her tone utterly stripped of its former pride. "Digital payment is perfectly fine. Tap whenever you're ready." The machine beeped a pleasant, validating green light. "Thank you. Have a lovely day," the young woman said cheerfully, taking the handle of her cheap suitcase and walking out into the London rain with her partner. Brenda stood in the silence of the empty shop. She slowly turned her head toward the small static-filled television mounted in the upper corner of the room. It was permanently tuned to CNBC. The headline on the red chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "Horizon Airlines posts. Record Q3 profits. Board Chair Naomi Harrison discusses the new era of aviation. On the screen, Andrew Ross Sorkin was sitting across from Naomi Harrison in a bright modern studio. Naomi looked poised, powerful, and untouchable. "The turnaround is unprecedented, Naomi," Sorkin was saying. "To go from the brink of total insolvency to leading the sector in premium revenue in 8 months. How did you change the culture so quickly?" Naomi leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk. She looked directly into the camera lens. It felt as though her dark, intelligent eyes were piercing straight through the screen crossing the Atlantic and staring directly into the discount luggage store in Croydon. "You changed the culture by removing the ego and removing the bias," Naomi said, her voice clear and resonant. "For too long, legacy corporations allowed a handful of individuals to act as arbitrary gatekeepers to luxury and comfort, basing their judgments on archaic prejudice stereotypes. We decided that the color of someone's skin or the clothes they choose to travel in does not dictate their net worth, and more importantly, it does not dictate their human value. We don't judge the hoodie, Andrew. We value the humanity. If you build a system where bigotry is fundamentally impossible to execute, profitability naturally follows." Brenda couldn't watch anymore. Her chest heaved with a silent, agonizing sob. She reached out with a trembling hand and pressed the power button on the television remote. The screen faded to black. She picked up a damp rag from beneath the register and began to mindlessly, mechanically wipe down the scuffed counter. She looked down at her own cheap rubber-soled shoes, completely alone in the fluorescent-lit purgatory she had built for herself. Money talks, wealth whispers, but karma is a relentless auditor, and it never ever misses a flight. And there you have it. The absolute ultimate story of instant karma and corporate justice. When you let prejudice dictate your actions, you never know who you are truly messing with, and in Brenda's case, it cost her an entire career, grounded a global airline, and left her with absolutely nothing. It's a powerful real-life reminder that respect shouldn't be based on what someone wears, the color of their skin, or how they look. If you loved this story of epic revenge and righteous, systemic justice, please smash that like button right now. Share this video with your friends so they can experience the satisfaction of Naomi's triumph, and make sure to subscribe to the channel with notifications turned on, so you never miss our next dramatic deep dive. Leave a comment below. Do you think Brenda's fate was exactly what she deserved, or did karma hit a little too hard? See you in the next one.